Alright guys, I remember back in the day there was this mod called Orespawn, and I always installed it with my mod pack because I considered it, a really good mod. It adds a bunch of bosses, a bunch of dimensions, a bunch of everything, and more importantly than that, it's all really strong. But I've been playing recently for my modded mod pack. Like I've been noticing that I've been ignoring most of the stuff in this mod, like the majority of the time I play through modded Minecraft, and it got me to think, was this mod ever good? And I don't think it is, and I'm gonna go for reasons why it isn't. Now, it's very important before I start to say a few things, because there's gonna be a lot of things people who know a little bit something about this mod are going to be asking me to talk about. I just want to say I'm not going to bring up any single thing, like any controversy related to the mod or someone who has played the mod. Um, we all know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, maybe not all, but you probably know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to separate the artist from the art. Like we're just gonna look at this mod from a objective standpoint. Like we're not gonna look at how it was developed, anything like that. We're just gonna look at how it is. Another thing is, most of this gameplay footage will be mine, or at least some of it will be. But I'm probably going to use footage from other YouTubers. So, if I do that, or when I do that, I'll make sure to credit them in the comment section below, so you can go check them out. Anyways, yeah, let's get into this mod. So, Orespawn is not a Vanilla Plus mod because it does not really follow with the vanilla design philosophy or anything like that. But that, of course, doesn't make it a bad mod, because there's plenty of mods that don't do that. Like Galacticraft, for example, iChun's mods, for example, they don't meet the theme of Minecraft at all, being they had space theme stuff, or futuristic stuff. So, they would be something that would never be added into Minecraft, but they're still really good mods in their own right. Orespawn also adds very OP items, and that also doesn't make the mod bad. Because there's tons of mods that add stuff that are OP compared to vanilla. Maybe not OP compared to this OPness Orespawn has, but compared to vanilla, yeah. And I don't honestly argue that the point of mods in the first place is to add stuff that goes beyond the original game, and that's not just including Minecraft. That's probably including just about any single game out there, So isn't what makes Orespawn bad either. What makes Orespawn bad, or at least the main reason is, it ignores vanilla completely, and it's really bad at balancing even itself. It's not like say Calamity mod from Terraria, where the items are only a little bit more powerful until you kill the Moon Lord, which is the final boss of base Terraria. In case you never played it, Orespawn just says we're not gonna fucking care about what's there already. We're just gonna add our own shit, and you're gonna enjoy it. The weakest boss, or the first boss you fight in the game, just spawns in the forest randomly, and it's not very rare for you to find it. And it has 120 HP and 16 damage. And keep in mind, the hearts you have is actually 20 HP, so that's enough to two-shot you without any armor on. And the first normal mob is a bee, and these are the second worst bees in any Minecraft mod. I think we both know what number one is. And even though I like this mod, back when I was a kid, I've always despised these things, man. So bees have 80 HP, deal 12 damage, do have 5 defense, and can give nausea, and are guaranteed to give you poison. If you have strengthen, you can take it out of iron armor. Assuming you also have a sword from the mod. But, a little strong for an enemy that just spawns in open daylight without you having to do anything to get them to spawn in open daylight. In the most common biome of the game, which is the forest biome. But you know what? So the bosses are overpowered, but they give you overpowered items, right? It can't be that bad. And I will give Orespawn credit where it's due, in that it actually does give you items required to fight the bosses. Because that's actually more than I could say for, say, the Godzilla mod, which is, I think they made it like assuming you would have Orespawn installed, because those bosses are almost perfectly designed for the Orespawn weapons, and they don't give you shit to fight them. Like, you literally have to have Orespawn installed if you're not going to go into creative to get the items to fight them. At least to my knowledge. Um, so Orespawn does get credit for that. But let's go over the kind of the weapons that Orespawn does have in it. Starting with the weakest sword in the mod is a rose sword. And the rose sword is called the rose sword because it's made from flowers, meaning you could obtain it within the first 10 seconds of the game. It does 10 damage, making it around the same strength as a sharpness 5 diamond sword. I think it might be a little bit weaker, but like I don't know, it's around the same strength. So a little bit strong to get at the start of the game. However, as overpowered as this sounds, this is actually kind of convenient, because 10 damage isn't really that OP compared to most mods. And being able to just get it immediately means you don't need to do a lot of grinding. And you can use ores from other mods to not have to worry about making a sword most of the time. So, alright. Then we have the Emerald set, and the Emerald sword also does 10 damage. And you got to remember before I go into the Emerald set, this is in 7. This mod only goes up to 7.10. So this is before the Village update came out. So it's actually much harder to get this armor than you're thinking. So don't worry about just, oh, I can get this within like 4 seconds of the game. I have infinite amount of it. You don't. Now, for some reason, the sword has 2 variations. And there's the Experience Sword and the Poison Sword, which give more experience and inflict poison, respectfully. Now, I don't get why these are separate swords, when these could easily just be enchantments that can be applied to any sword. There's several swords where I think XP bonuses could be a good enchantment, but instead you have to give it to the weakest sword in the mod, and you never use this sword because it's so weak, and I really think that those 2 enchantments should be in the base game, but it isn't. Emerald armor also gives about 20 defense, which is the same as diamond armor. So it brings a question. Why is the sword weaker than the sword I made from flowers? Why is armor the same strength from diamond? When diamond is more common than emerald is. An emerald pickaxe is the best use of emeralds because it gives you silk touch and it is faster and more durable than a diamond pickaxe. So, the first new ore is the amethyst ore, and this is usually what I use when I'm playing in this mod, just because it's somewhat common and it's only a little bit. And hang on. Just because it's somewhat common, and it is strong enough to start fighting the bosses. The Amethyst Sword does 15 damage, and the armor gives about 22 defense. So it is the first set of armor that's actually stronger than vanilla. And if you're playing with other mods, I wouldn't recommend using an armor stronger than the Amethyst set, just because everything after this is just completely broken. Now, it may seem hard to get this ore, but if you know what you're doing, you can actually get it within probably the first hour of the game, and not have to worry about it, about losing it ever. Because all you need to do is find the unstable anthill, and go into the danger dimension. Then you just need to find one of the dungeons where the stairs are made of amethyst. And then as long as you have an iron pickaxe, you have pretty much unguarded access to like hundreds of amethyst blocks. So, if you know what you're doing, you can get this set pretty quickly. The ruby set is the second strongest set that you can mine, and it is the rarest ore in the mod. The sword does 20 damage, and which makes it strong enough to one-shot a zombie. The armor gives off 25 defense. And like amethyst, it can be found in the same dungeon, like on the outside, but it is at least not like free, because you do need to mine it from the walls, and it will be close enough to the spawners in the dungeon. Still, since you only need like maybe 3 blocks, you probably could get this pretty quickly if you want to. And considering you could get amethyst to do that, you'd be able to do that if you want. However, I honestly wouldn't recommend doing this. Like, amethyst is enough, and now the ultimate set is the strongest you can mine. The ultimate sword does 46 damage, but 6 of that's due to it having sharpness. And it has other enchantments on it like Fire Aspect, Bane of Arthropods, and Smite. And I might have been missing some there, but those are the ones I remember it having. The ultimate armor has 32 defense, as well as every kind of protection you could have at level 5. And unlike the other ores, there's actually a bow. bow, which I would actually unlock before you unlock the rest of this set. It has pretty much every bow achievement you would want, and it's faster and more durable than a normal bow. In my opinion, this is the second best weapon in the mod. The set is really hard to obtain though, because it requires 2 different ores, and these ores aren't affected by fortune, and when you smelt them, you only get the nuggets for said ores, meaning you need to get 9 of them for a single ingot. Thanks to the Miner's Dream in the mod though, you can get both of these ores quicker, and in the Basilisk dungeon, you can find the ingots as well as the pieces of the armor and the equipment made from the ingots. So as long as you have the ultimate bow, I would recommend just raiding those. You will need the ultimate bow and some armor because you do have to fight 3 basilisks in order to get this. So it's not like the other ones where you can just walk up and get it. And this is the first armor in the mod that is repairable for some reason. The Emerald, Amethyst, and Ruby armors can't be repaired, but anything stronger than the ultimate armor, it can be. And I kind of do like this, just simply because you earned anything stronger than the ultimate. And keep in mind, it is not very easy to get more of the ultimate armor until you kill most of the bosses. But what do you get if you kill most of the bosses? Well, you can make a sword out of an item that almost every single boss in the mod drops. And I'm also gonna, while I'm talking, include the World Guardian sword, even though that's gotten from killing the king or getting to level 6 in the challenge dungeon from the danger dimension. Even though it's stronger, my criticisms are the same, so I'm going to be talking about it at the same time. They're basically the same weapon, except one does 500 damage, and the other does 750 damage. Now these swords are actually kind of unique, as they don't have the range of a normal sword. They have a very decent range and can hit enemies from pretty far away. Now you may be like, oh, that sounds fucking awesome. And you're right, that does sound fucking awesome. And I do like the concept of a weapon you get from beating most of the bosses in the mod. And in case you're wondering bosses you don't need to beat, because I forgot to mention that, you don't need to beat Mobzilla, King, or the Queen. They are every other boss though you need to beat in order to get Slice or Big Bertha, which I'm going to be referring to as Slice because that's shorter and it's the one I personally prefer. They're basically the same sword. I just like Slice's design more, or Slice's name more actually. But they're both the same sword. Now, the reason this only sounds fucking awesome is I'm 99% sure the damage is only that high to just fuck with other mods' balancing level and to make Orespawn look like it's stronger than it actually is. Because although the damage is R500 and 750, they might as well be 150 and 250. Because that's how much damage they're actually going to end up doing. This is because of a mechanic that I think is just implemented extremely poorly, where the bosses have a damage limit. Now, I'm not sure how it works, but I was testing with the Godzilla mod, which adds stronger weapons. And so I was able to confirm that it isn't a single number, but some kind of percentage. The example I was using is the Royal Guardian Sword does about 250, or a little bit less than 250 damage to the King, where the 2500 damage Godzilla Sword does about 800 damage to the King, meaning it can't be an upper limit, because if it was, the Godzilla Sword would do the same amount of damage. Now, I'm honestly sure. Now, there's probably some good reason why this exists, but it's still way too high of a limit, and it doesn't even scale to the mod. Like, there's no reason why the Hercules Beetle, which only has 240 HP, should need 2 hits to kill with a 500 damage sword that you can only get after killing the said beetle at least once. But the worst offender of this, by far in my opinion, is Mobzilla. So you're intended to fight him with Slice, which is a 500 damage sword. Mobzilla has 4,000 HP. Slice does 80 damage to Mobzilla. That combined with Mobzilla's regeneration means you're going to need to hit him well over 50 times to kill him. Now, keep in mind, if Slice did half of the damage it was supposed to, you would still need to hit Mobzilla around 20 times, which would still be a hard fight, but it wouldn't be a fucking horrible war of attrition. And I know what you're saying. Oh, you're only mad because the bosses are hard. No, I'm mad because the boss is artificially hard. A hard boss would be something like the Mage Sisters fight from Star Allies, where, all the Mage Sisters attacks work against each other perfectly, and it's genuinely hard to dodge because of their synergy they have. But, it's not been really working to your disadvantage, other than their movesets working so well together. Artificially hard is when you have a 500 damage sword that does less than a fifth of the damage it's supposed to do to a boss that has 4,000 HP, can knock you back ridiculously far without warning because the mod developer is too lazy to animate the fucking attack that does that, and has very high regeneration, which combined with the knockback can make the embarrassingly low damage you deal useless. That's artificial difficulty. Mobzilla isn't really a hard fight, it's just a massive pain in the ass. But speaking of Mobzilla, he does drop Mobzilla scales, which can be used to make the Mobzilla scale armor, which has 38 defense. I think it's designed for the challenge dungeon, but it is possible to do it with ultimate armor and slice. So it really is mainly a prestige thing. Like the ultimate set, however, it gives protections, but this time it gives you protection 10, which is normally unobtainable in the base game. So, pretty good reward for killing Mobzilla, to be fair. Then there's the Royal Guardian armor. Now the Royal Guardian's, in case you're wondering, yeah, it's attached to the Royal Guardian sword. And like the Royal Guardian sword, you can get it by either killing the king or beating level 6 of the challenge dungeon. It has 42 defense and the same enchantments as the Mobzilla armor, plus a new one called Glide. And yeah, Glide's awesome. It does exactly what it sounds. You just glide. Really cool. I wish that was in base Minecraft, to be honest with you. Finally, there's a Queen skill armor, which is attainable by killing the Queen. It is the strongest armor in terms of defense, with 48. However, it doesn't have any of the enchantments of the Royal Guardian armor, and since you can't get those enchantments, I think it's worse. But in terms of defense, it is stronger. Now, before I talk about the bosses, I'm going to talk about some of the food items. And all the food items are pretty good. They restore a lot of hunger, and most of them give a status effect, but I don't think any of them are anywhere near as good as the bacon. Bacon is dirt cheap to obtain, because all you need is salt and some raw pork. And salt is probably the most common ore out of any mod I've ever played. Because it spawns about as much as coal does, but it gives you 8 salt when you smelt it. And crafting the bacon also gives you 2 bacon instead of 1 bacon. And once you cook the bacon, it gives you strength and regeneration for 2 minutes. Basically making regular golden apples obsolete. And the enchanted ones are only worth it if you could either farm the enchanted golden apple cows from the mod, or can just find a bunch of them, usually in the Chaos Dimension. But I mean, hey, you have the equipment to fight the bosses, and well, yeah, the equipment is definitely suitable for fighting the bosses. The problem is the bosses suck. How to fight an Orespawn boss. Step 1, find the boss. Step 2, attack or shoot at the boss. Step 3, if necessary, get on a mount. Step 4, win. I'm going to be honest, only 2 bosses I thought were fun in the entire mod were the Jumpy Bug, which is probably my favorite boss in the mod. I just like how it jumps around, usually out of the way of your attacks, or maybe to attack you, but either way it just jumps around. And it's a really good summoner boss because it summons spit bugs, which are decently strong, but not too strong. And, and they shoot stuff at you, so it's not really like zombies, it's like a kind of fun boss to fight. And, it's just really fun fighting the Jumpy Bug, because, I like how it just jumps around and how it summons. It just works out really well, and I think it's a very fun fight. The other boss that I thought was fun was the Vortex, and I think it's just the circumstances involved with that fight that make it fun. And I also think it's the only knockback boss that's fun, simply because it's like you could almost avoid the knockback. Like, it's like you have to hit, like, it's like designed perfectly for melee, which is what you basically have to fight him as, and the mod developer luckily knew that, and they designed it perfectly. Basically, you have to back away from the Vortex before it knocks you super high in the air. Basically guaranteed to kill you from fall damage. But it's easy to do so, because you have to just back up, but you can't back up so far you can't hurt it with the sword, and it's super fun. It's super fun. And I'm also going to give Mothra and the Brutafly a pass, just because they're basically giant ghast, and, who doesn't like fighting ghast? Like, Brutify shouldn't be in the mod though, even because it's just a worse version of Mothra, and it's a secret boss. I think it's one of the better bosses in the mod, but I feel like it should be removed. And I'm not going to talk about every single boss, but I am going to give credit to the Hercules Beetle, Emperor Scorpion, Caterkiller, and the Molnoid because they all at least try to do something different. Um, well, pretty much every other boss in the mod um, is just either a zombie with incredible health and defense, or a flying zombie with incredible health and defense. And when I say incredible, I'm not fucking joking when I say incredible. Um, I'm gonna give the mod developer credit for actually giving the bosses defense, because so many other mods don't do that. And I feel like they should do that, because even vanilla Minecraft does that. And it's kind of essential when you have damage, you have weapons that deal 20 damage. But I still shouldn't need to use Strengthen to seriously harm a mob when I'm using a sword that does 20 damage without Strengthen. Now, at least the developer was aware of this, and it's super easy to get items that do Strengthen, but I think it's still poor design either way, because he was aware of this either way. And I know I mentioned the Molnoid as one of the different bosses, but I actually hate the Molnoid. Just because it suffocates you way too much, it takes way too long to get rid of it, and yeah, I feel like if the was nerfed though, in both their ability and the amount the Molnoid will spawn, like maybe give him like a cooldown or something, because he definitely does not have one. Just it needs to be changed a bit, and if you do make those changes, um, it would probably be a pretty good boss. Unfortunately, though, it's just kind of a worse version of the Caterkiller, which only spawns cobwebs, meaning you only get stuck. And it also spawns cobwebs a lot less than the Mole Knight spawns suffocation dirt. So, yeah, I don't know why I didn't just do that, but with dirt. Emperor Scorpion, even though I mentioned it before, is also kind of just a war of attrition. I think the Jumping Bug is already a pretty good summoner boss, so I don't know why the Emperor Scorpion's even in the mod. I think he also has just the worst defense in the mod. Like, if you don't have strengthen, it's going to take you so long. That, like, say you're 18 when you start, it's going to be your son's 18th birthday when you finish. And that's assuming you have the ultimate sword, which you're intended to have when you're fighting him. Which, it only does 46 damage, it's not that strong. In fact, it only has one defense less than Mobzilla. But it also has like less damage reduction, but still. But still, it shouldn't be that high. It needs to be lowered by a good amount. Now, we're going to be talking about the post-Big Bertha bosses, which are the aforementioned Mobzilla, King, and Queen. And I already talked about Mobzilla pretty passionately, so we're just going to talk about the King and the Queen for right now. Now, they are the final bosses, but they're still a complete insult to balancing, even when you compare them to the rest of the mod. And these bosses are just wars of attrition, just like the Emperor Scorpion. Now, the Queen has a basically insta-kill and durability ignoring move, which you can ward off with the creeper repellent, and you can shoot it or slice it with your weapon. But given her already crazy stats, I really don't think that she should have this. Basically what it does is it ignores your defenses and deals a percentage of your health, and that can include 100%. Like, it is just ridiculous, man. I understand they wanted to differentiate from the King, and good on them for doing that, but that's not the way to differentiate it. It's just bullshit. Now, the King is unbalanced, because when you kill the King, it drops just a little bit amount of items, like every item from every single mod you have installed. And now, to be fair, if you're strong enough to kill the King, you're not going to have trouble getting 90% of those items. And if you're able to kill the King, I think you deserve 100% of those items. And keep in mind, most of that 1% you can't get are going to be like unused texture items, like the texture for grass blocks. The problem with this, though, is there's so many items that, like, when the King spawns anything of actual value, which he will, because he drops every item from every mod you have. But, like, say, for example, like, any item from the Godzilla mod, the spawning for the Queen, if you want to fight the Queen, Um, it's gonna be near impossible to find in the chaos of like hundreds of items being on the ground. Also, I think the king and queen both have pretty bad hitboxes because you need to be basically the torso of the king or queen. So you need to be just a little bit too close to them, and basically the only way to reliably damage them is to fly under them. Um, I think even with a mount, this is pretty hard because they both are really fast. Um, Now I'm going to mention the Ultimate King Easter egg, even though it's a secret Easter egg boss, but it's basically impossible. If you don't use to kill all command or a command that can call upon it, which you can't do in 7.10, it's impossible to kill the king. And notice how I said kill all and not the kill command. Basically, it has an infinite amount of defense. It has orbs to deal an infinite amount of damage, and that home on you. I don't even think the queen's home on you. Um, and it has the same stats as the king other than that. So yeah, fuck that. It's really stupid because it's impossible to do. If it was possible to do, alright, I can see a King EX fight working, but it's not possible to do, so it shouldn't be in the mod. Now, you'd be surprised about this, but aside from Mobzilla, I think the regeneration for all of the bosses is actually very balanced. They usually can't regenerate too much health, and when they can, it's only when you're expected to fight them with like super strong weapons, and they've already lost a majority of their health, such as the king. You're expected to fight them with a 750 damage weapon, and it only regenerates quickly once you get to like under 500 health. Um, and they only do that like maybe 2 or 3 times every 10 seconds as you're fighting them. Basically, all it does is ensure you can't just run away from a boss and then fight them with the same amount of health. And you know what? That's actually a pretty good way to balance the boss fights. So I think Mobzilla's the only one he messed up on, so I'm gonna have to give him props for that. And it was shitting on Mobzilla earlier, but he is the closest boss fight to being good, or at least the closest bad boss to being good. Seriously, I think as long as you reduce the knockback he does, animate the attack that does the knockback, like seriously, reduce the amount of damage reduction he has, and he would be a pretty good final boss. And it's a shame because I think the king and queen are just annoying, but Mobzilla has potential. Um, Now, before we move on to the next topics, I just want to mention a few cool things about the bosses, and that's you can find the spawn eggs both in chest and, more interestingly, ancient giant blocks. And the interesting part about that is that was the original purpose of the mod, was just to have ancient giant dried blocks you could use for spawn eggs. And to be honest with you, that's a really cool feature I think they should add into the base game. They're adding an archaeology update. That's the perfect thing they should add. Basically, you can spawn any boss in the mod and anything in vanilla Minecraft as long as you find their spawn egg, and I think that's pretty cool. And two, this is also pretty cool. They fight each other. Yeah, there's a really nothing about that. It's just kind of awesome. So there's some other things this mod adds. So let's go over them. Now the dungeons. Now the dungeons in this mod are kind of boring. They're either cubes or chests in the wide open with some mobs guarding them. There's one I consider pretty fun though, and that was the challenge dungeon. Or the challenge dungeons actually, like both the weaker and stronger one. It's really satisfying to go in there and mercifully slaughter all the bosses with Slice, and I think it's the true reward for getting Slice. Although I'm going to be honest, spawners are too hard to break, and it just went on for too long. It honestly got to a point where, like, if after 5 minutes, like I was just slaughtering the bosses, and I just turned on peaceful mode because you know what? I thought it was fair. I mean, I killed like 100 of them. They didn't come close to killing me, and every time I tried to get to the spawner, they knocked me back. So you know what? I think I cleared that fairly. Yeah, but honestly, it'd be a pretty good dungeon if there's less spawners on the outside, and it was easier to break the ones on the inside. Now the dimensions. The dimensions in this mod are horrible, and I think they're very unnecessary. But before I go into the dimensions, I'm going to mention how you get into the dimensions. And those are with the ants and butterflies. I think this is very creative, but it can be a little annoying to find sometimes. But overall, though, I don't have too much problems with that, just because it's a cool way of getting into the dimensions, an accessible way of getting into dimensions. But I wish there was an alternate way to get to the dimensions, especially considering there's like 5 of them. Like maybe it's a drop from killing like Vortex or something, because that's the only thing you need to do in the crystal dimension. Now the first dimension is the village dimension. And this dimension is literally just overworld, but with villages. Now, and the only villages. Like this is just a plains in the overworld. Now I shitted on this dimension on the gameplay of this mod, the second channel, which some of this footage is from. But it does make sense from a balancing perspective that I didn't realize. And one, well, that's because Mobzilla spawns in the village dimension. And Mobzilla causes a massive amount of mob grief. So it's good that he only spawns there, because if he spawned in the overworld, it would be an absolute disaster. So you know what? This dimension gets a pass, even though it's terrible. The minor dimension is horrible. There's nothing to do there. Like there's literally nothing to do there except find the Leonopteryxes and raid the Basilisk dungeons in hopes of finding ultimate armor. Everything else in this dimension could just be put in the overworld without change. I honestly think they could have even increased the Orespawn rate.
He said it! He said it!
And it would be justified because of how powerful everything in the mod is. It should have either been with the village dimension or just removed from the mod. Utopia dimension. This dimension should have been just in a biome because nothing happens in this dimension. There are really large trees in this dimension that could actually be spawned in by an item, and these trees don't have anything to offer. But in a similar vein, there's a tree of goodness. This tree is very rare. It's like the other trees, but it's made of a bunch of ore blocks, including some of the ones from the mod. Now you would think this would be OP as hell, but it's actually guarded by the king, which makes it surprisingly very, very balanced. Now, this whole dimension could easily just be a biome, especially considering the king is the only hostile mob that spawns in the entire dimension. Now, the danger dimension is similar to the Utopia dimension in the fact that it could easily just be a biome, and any of its dungeons could just spawn in the overworld. Next dimension. Now, Chaos dimension, I'm also going to give a pass, and the reason for that is it spawns almost every single boss in the mod there. And I think it's a good way to find some of the bosses you might not be able to find. For example, during my playthrough, I needed to find the Emperor Scorpion, and it's also a good source of the enchanted golden apple cows. It's not the best dimension by any means, but it does have the second most variety out of any of the dimensions, and it's based off of a scrap dimension from Minecraft's beta stage, which is pretty cool. Finally, is the crystal dimension. Now, this is the only good dimension in the entire mod. And the reason for that is, the dimension requires you don't have any items in your inventory to enter. In a mod where most, if not all the stuff is overpowered, this is a really good idea. And unlike most other dimensions, the small scope of the crystal dimension works out very well. It'd be annoying if you had to play for like the whole game again. But only having to fight one boss, which is the aforementioned Vortex, and only having about 3 tiers of armor and one of them being wood, makes it a fun little challenge. And Crystal Dimension, in my opinion, is the single best part of Orespawn. And I think it's a really, really good concept. So as you can see with all dimensions, with the exception of maybe 2 of them, they're all way too similar to the overworld. And this just makes them awful, and I honestly tend to completely ignore them. Now, the one last thing I want to talk about is the tameable mobs, or at least the one I found normable. Normable. I'm keeping that in the video. The ones I found notable. Now, first is the girlfriends and boyfriends.
Hey, how's it going? I've actually got something for you. This is the bread that you asked me to get, and you can now go make me a sandwich.
And I'm only bringing these up because people are going to ask me about them. And the mod is known for these. Infamous for these, in fact. They have 80 HP and can use swords. However, they're actually better with the default attacks, which are either throwing shoes or throwing game controllers. But the fact that they can't equip any good armor in the mod, and the fact that their health pool is really low, they're pretty useless. They're only really in the mod as a joke. And the Cephalodrome drone. Now this is one of the few flying mounts in the mod. In my opinion, it's the single best in the entire mod. And the reason, it simply just controls nicely. It has 300 HP, 16 defense, and deals 70 damage. And something I think is interesting is that it deals twice as much damage if you're fighting the Kraken. And keep in mind, the Kraken only has 1,000 HP, so... Now, it kind of makes me wish I used him instead of the Dragon Bike from Animal Bikes, but, you know. The Leonotrix is another flying mount. However, they fly very weird and are weaker than the Cephalodrome. However, it's still worth pointing these out because they have pretty good stats and they can provide support when you're not flying on them, making them pretty useful for fighting the Kraken. The Prince is the reward for killing the King or completing the level 6 of the challenge dungeon. Now, the Prince is interesting because he has 3 forms, and if it dies for any reason, it actually drops a spawn egg so you can spawn another Prince in. Unfortunately, though, the Prince is flawed. The first version of the Prince is adorable, and it has 500 HP, 16 defense, and deals 10 damage, and it mimics the King's attacks. It's cute, but it's too weak to be more than a status symbol. The young version of the Prince is probably the best one. Sets are 500. It has 1500 HP, 14 defense, and deals 50 damage. Combined with the fact that it's doing the King's attacks, it's definitely strong enough to help out. It's not only that, but it flies very well, especially compared to some of the other flying mounts. Honestly, my only problem with it is it's very easy to hit the Prince with your own attacks, made worse by the fact that the Prince is seemingly the only mob in the entire mod that does not have damage reduction. This makes it slightly worse than the Cephalodrome, in my opinion. I think there should be some sort of friendly fire filter so you can't hit it, but other than that, it's pretty good. Now, the young adult version of the Prince is the final version of the Prince, and it is the strongest, but in my opinion, it's actually worse than the young version. And the reason for this is it's just way too awkward to fly him. Its stats are pretty good, though, with 3,000 HP, 20 defense, and 100 damage. Excluding defense, which is comparable to the King, it has a little bit under half of the stats of the King. It's also much harder to hit than the young Prince, with your own attacks. And it's a shame it controls so weird, because it would literally be the best thing in the entire mod if it controlled normally. Which I don't know why it does control so weird, because the Cephalodrome controls fine, and that's from the same mod. And the young Prince controls fine, and that's from the same mod. And finally, the Princess is basically the same thing as the Prince, but instead of having to kill the King, you have to kill the Queen. Now, unfortunately, it only has one form, and that's the toddler form. It has 400 HP, 14 defense, and 10 attack. Now, you're probably thinking that it's worse than the Prince. However, it's actually better than the Prince because it has its own form of the Queen's Purple Power. Now, it's unfortunately not the same as the Queen's Purple Power, but it's still pretty good. Basically, there's 3 different orbs. A red one that sets enemies on fire, a green one that poisons enemies, and a blue one that weakens enemies. So this makes the Prince as a pretty good support mob, and probably the best one in the game. You gotta be careful though, because unlike the Prince, if she dies, she's dead and does not drop a spawn egg. So yeah, that was the Orespawn mod. And it's a shame, because I feel like it's a shame this mod was so bad, because it honestly seemed pretty cool. And there's a lot of stuff that if done differently could have honestly worked out. And and for all of its faults, I do wish there was more Minecraft mods like this, that added just really OP items, but, did it well too, added balancing. And it's a real shame too, and it's a real shame that, a lot of Minecraft mods are just too scared to differentiate from vanilla. And, but it's a real shame that there isn't. So for all of its faults, I gotta respect Orespawn for what it's trying to do.